Initially, when the Bantus were in West Africa, they called themselves Yahuns, which in Aramaic Hebrew, is Yehud, meaning Judah. The capital of Cameroon, to this day, is Yaoundé, which also in Hebrew means Judah. There was a time in history, when the Bantus of southern Africa called themselves Azanians. In 1930 there were excavations at Mapungubwe, in the area of Limpopo River, which revealed the skeletal remains of people that became known as ancient Azanians. According to James Strong's Dictionary of the Bible, the name Azania is Azanja, which means an Israelite. The Bantus called themselves Azanians, which in Hebrew means Israelites. Once a contemporary of Enoch Suntanga, the composer of Nkosi Sikalila Africa, Reverend J. H. Soga, made reference to how the Bantu people, in what is called South Africa today, came to be called Bantu, instead of their old name Azanians. He explained, in 1928, that the name Bantu was of modern application, and that it arose when Dr. Bleek, a scholar of Azanian languages, used the word Bantu, as a comprehensive term for all the dialects of the inhabitants, who formed a large section of the people of southern Africa. He asserted that Dr. Bleek had no intention of applying this term to the people themselves. So, the Bantus called themselves Israelites before the white man came to South Africa. Lisa H. Maki wrote a book entitled, Purity and Exile, in which he stated that, we are the descendants of Israelites. History says so. This was seen in 1972 when President Michael Mikombero proclaimed on the radio that we are Israelites. Our habits resemble very much the habits of the Israelites. All the Hutus who were captured to be killed, they behaved like sheep, and they did nothing but praying and singing only. This demonstrates how we resemble the Israelites. The Israelites, before attacking a country, first of all pray to God. We are the first Bantus who came to Africa. We are Bantus, thus Israelites. This demonstrates that we had a democracy before the Tutsi came. It was good. There were no distinctions of race. The Zulus, another Bantu tribe in sub-Saharan Africa, like many other Bantu tribes, also knew this to be true. In a book entitled, Jews of Ethiopia, The Birth of an Elite, edited by Tudor Parfit, and Emanuela Trevisan Semi, the following is written, in 1901, the linguist and magistrate, James Stewart spent a day at the Royal Hotel in Ladysmith, interviewing 3 Zulu elders in an attempt to recreate something of the Zulu past. In these conversations one of the Zulus, Lazarus Mkaba, traced Zulu history back to ancient Israel and Greece. Mkaba was convinced that it was the Zulus who in fact were the lost children of Israel, and that they would be redeemed when they remembered, and started worshipping their lost and unknown God. As we have seen, many of the South African tribes had been awarded an Israelite pedigree. Others, such as the Western Sotho or Tswana who inhabited the northern and eastern grazing areas of the Kalahari, were likened to the ancient Israelites, and some observers did note similarities between their customs and those mentioned in the Bible. Not long after Mach had made his momentous discovery, efforts were made to show that Jews had once lived at Great Zimbabwe. In no time at all, the Kernga-speaking Shona people, and specifically the Lemba tribe, were being enlisted as Jews and defined in precisely the same way as so many other African tribes and groups had been before and since. In the same book, the following is noted: northward of Katanga lives one of the greatest tribes of Central Africa, the Baluba, who are of undoubted Semitic origin. The name Baluba means the lost tribe, and their language and customs have many Hebrew affinities. Their name for, an idea of God, with their word for water and people and many other words and ideas, show their Semitic strain. The idea of a Jewish identity for the Luba has recently been described in a publication of the United States Institute of Peace. Since the early 1960s, the report observes, Luba administrative, social, and commercial elites have spread all over the Congo country. As early as the 1960s, the Baluba regarded themselves as the Jews of the Congo, and some of their most notorious leaders, for example J. Ngalula, were called Moisi. They felt persecuted by most of the other ethnic constituencies, who disliked the privileges the Baluba allegedly garnered under the white administration. During the Second Republic, they remained highly visible in politics. President Mobutu's strategy was to consistently absorb the Luba elite into the highest levels of the political hierarchy, in order to better control it. Since 1978, one of the harshest opponents of the regime among the Luba elite has been Etienne Tshisekedi, later named the Zairean Moise, who, together with 10 fellow Kasaïans, led a protracted struggle against Mobutu. In almost all the regions and provinces, the Luba diaspora is implicitly accused of wanting power only for its own people. Like the Shabans, the Luba are threatened with expulsion by the native sons. The grievances of the Jews of Zaire once again resonate. After the fall of the Lubalunda Empire, some of the Baluba fled to Zambia. And they settled in Luapula, northern, Muchinga, Copperbelt, and northwestern provinces of Zambia, and called themselves Bimbas, Lundas, Kaondes, among other tribal names. It is also interesting to note that, 3 of all Bantu tribes in Zambia, namely Tolnga, Ila, and Lenji, known as Bantu Botatwe, meaning 3 peoples, are mainly known for their many cattle. Remember that the 3 tribes of Israel, Reuben, Gad, and half the tribe of Manasseh, were also known for having a lot of cattle. Numbers chapter 32, verse 1-5 and 33. Now the children of Reuben and the children of Gad had a very great multitude of cattle, and when they saw the land of Jazer, and the land of Gilead, that, behold, the place was a place for cattle, the children of Gad and the children of Reuben came and spake unto Moses, and to Eleazar the priest, and unto the princes of the congregation, saying, Adaroth, and Dibon, and Jazer, and Nimrah, and Heshbon, and Eleale, and Shabam, and Nebo, and Bean, even the country which the Lord smote before the congregation of Israel, is a land for cattle, and thy servants have cattle. Wherefore, said they, if we have found grace in thy sight, let this land be given unto thy servants for a possession, and bring us not over Jordan. And Moses gave unto them, even to the children of Gad, and to the children of Reuben, and unto half the tribe of Manasseh the son of Joseph, the kingdom of Sihon king of the Amorites, and the kingdom of Og king of Bashan, the land, with the cities thereof in the coasts, even the cities of the country round about. Even the name Zambia, and that of one of its rivers, Zambezi, leaves much to be desired, because, during the Greek captivity, there was an Israelite of the house of Judah, named Zambes. 1 Esdras chapter 9, verse 26 and 34. Of them of Israel, of the sons of Pharas, Hiermas, and Edias, and Melchias, and Malus, and Eleazar, and Asibias, and Benias. And of the sons of Azara, Sesses, Esrel, Azalus, Samadus, Zambes, Josephus. Bantu culture is Hebrew culture. There are many Bantu customs which show that the Bantus are the true and original descendants of ancient Israelites. This is well noted in a book called, Jews of Ethiopia, The Birth of an Elite. Captain Alan Gardner took the customs of the Zulus to be apparently of Jewish origin. Some of the customs he enumerated included circumcision, the tradition of a younger brother marrying the widow of his deceased brother, Levirate marriage, the daubing of the lintels of homes in times of sickness, the festival of the first fruits, and so on. Throughout the 1850s, Zulus were identified as Jews. Their settled, pastoral life and their religious and social customs were evidence enough of this. Gr. Peppercorn, the magistrate of Pafana location, observed to the Native Affairs Commission that in fact the Zulus practiced a sort of ancient Judaism. A general type of the customs and laws of the Amazulu may be found in the early history of the Hebrews. Peppercorn suggested that any European who wanted to understand Zulu customs had only to read the Old Testament. Zulu polygamy, marriage customs, even attitudes towards work were all described in the appropriate biblical passage. Henry Francis Finn, who had established a small Zulu chieftaincy in the 1820s and had spent decades living among them, noted, I was surprised to find a considerable resemblance between many of the Zulu customs and those of the Jews. These included war offerings, sin offerings, propitiatory offerings, festival of first fruits, periods of uncleanness, on the decease of relatives and touching the dead, circumcision, rules regarding chastity, rejection of swine's flesh. Finn concluded that in view of the nature of semblance of many of their customs to those of the ancient Jews, as prescribed under the Levitical priesthood, I am led to form the opinion that the Zulu tribes have been very superior to what they are at the present time. Colenso was convinced that the two Zulu names for God embraced perfectly the notions of the divine contained in the Hebrew words Elohim and Jehovah. So close indeed were the resemblances, according to Bishop Colenso, that he frequently suggested that anyone who wanted to really understand the Bible had best study Zulu customs. Zulu habits and even the nature of their country so nearly correspond to those of the ancient Israelites, that the very scenes are brought continually, as it were, before their eyes, and vividly realized in a practical point of view. Practically everything about the Zulus, from their lunar calendar to the order of religious feasts, seemed to reflect an Israelite past. The Zulu keeps his annual feasts, and observes the new moons as the old Hebrew did. The very Zulus have their festivals at the beginning of the southern spring and at the end of our autumn, corresponding to the Feast of the First Fruits and the Feast of the Ingathering of the ancient Hebrews. Many customs of the Zulus, maintained Nkaba, were common to Jews as well. He specifically mentioned the butchering of sacrificial meat and the burning of incense for sacrificial and other ritual purposes. He also maintained that the Jews, like the Zulus, slit their earlobes. Hebrew customs, like maternal seclusion, circumcision, menstrual seclusion, funeral purification, levirate marriage, polygamy, among others, are, to this day, still practiced by black people in sub-Saharan Africa. Even the traditional attire of the Bantus shows that they're the true and original descendants of ancient Israelites. Ancient Israelites wore bonnets, bracelets on the legs or arms, headbands, earrings, rings and nose jewels, just as the Bantus. Isaiah chapter 3, verse 18 to 23. In that day the Lord will take away the bravery of their tinkling ornaments about their feet and their calls, and their round tires like the moon, the chains and the bracelets, and the mufflers, the bonnets and the ornaments of the legs, and the headbands, and the tablets, and the earrings, the rings, and nose jewels, the changeable suits of apparel, and the mantles, and the wimples, and the crisping pins, the glasses, and the fine linen, and the hoods, and the veils. Traditionally, the Bantus wear girdles and garments with fringes on them, as commanded in the Torah. Leviticus chapter 8, verse 13. And Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 12. And Moses brought Aaron's sons, and put coats upon them, and girded them with girdles, and put bonnets upon them, as the Lord commanded Moses. Thou shalt make thee fringes upon the four quarters of thy vesture, wherewith thou coverest thyself. The traditional attire of the Bantus is greatly inspired by the Levitical law. Bantu cultural practices are actually Hebrew customs. You won't find these cultural practices among Europeans or Arabs. The languages that black people speak in sub-Saharan Africa also show that they're Hebrews. Niger-Congo languages are dialects of ancient Hebrew. Bantu languages are similar, they have similar alphabets, and meanings of words as compared to the Hebrew language. In a book entitled, Jews of Ethiopia, The Birth of an Elite, the following is stated: according to Baston, the Igbo language had interesting parallels with the Hebrew idiom. To this day the Igbos themselves cherish the notion that they are somehow descended from the people of Israel. The idea that Igbo and Hebrew, or Ivri, are one and the same word and that the two languages are closely related is quite widespread. A full-blooded Israelite theory, with respect to the Ashanti, was presented in a detailed study published in 1930, by Joseph J. Williams, a Jesuit member of the Royal Geographical Society, as well as of the American Geographical Society, who found traces of Hebrew in the Ashanti language. Not a few Hebrew words and possible certain distinctive Hebrew constructions have been grafted on the native languages of the Ashanti. He took the name Ashanti to mean the sons of Ashan, which he declared to be a city in Judea. The root words of the Bantu dialects are still ancient Hebrew. The fact that a root word has no prefix or suffix makes it the most basic part of a word, so the ability to find the root words of Hebrew in the Bantu languages show that Bantu languages are dialects of Hebrew. In linguistics, a root word holds the most basic meaning of any word. It's what's left after you remove all the affixes, hence the fact that one can find the root words of the Hebrew language through Bantu languages, only means the languages must be one and the same. One can find in the Strong's Hebrew Concordance that they take you to what they call the primitive root of words, but since Hebrew is not their original language, they could only go but so far into the root words. On the other hand, since the Bantu languages are dialects of Hebrew, one can find the actual primitive root of what the concordance deems to be a primitive root, thus showing that the actual primitive, ancient, roots of the Hebrew language are still reserved in the true Hebrew language, which is known as Bantu languages today. For example, the English language comes from Greek and Latin. The English word Alexander is comprised of two Greek root words because Greek is the origin of English. In Greek, Alexan means to defend, and Aner means man, hence the English word Alexander means man defender. This is a key indication that Greek is the origin of English. Now apply this concept to compare the Hebrew language with the Bantu language, and you will find that the Hebrew words are comprised of Bantu root words to this day, showing that the Bantus still retain the Hebrew language, and that Yiddish is a corruption of the language. This fact also shows that Bantu root words were and are actually Hebrew by evidence of them still correlating to the ancient language to this day. For example, let's look at the Hebrew word H6005, is Immanuel, which is Emmanuel in English, and means with us is God. In Igbo, the word Imi Onu Allah means with us is God, or God with us, which is the same thing it meant in the Hebrew Concordance, and the same interpretation that Matthew gave in Matthew's chapter 1 verse 23. Imi no Allah is a three-word sentence which means, within rests God in Igbo. Also in the Yoruba dialect, the word no means is, so when combining the Bantu root words, Imi no Allah, means within is God or God is within, because the Bantu speakers still speak Hebrew as they did in the scriptures. It is amazing that from ancient days of the prophets in the Hebrew script, the words still have the same meaning in Bantu today. Another example, the word H5921 or H5920 is il, which means upward, height, above, upon. The il makes an e sound in this word. Here il is pronounced elu, which still means the same thing in Igbo, Bantu, because elu means up, height, above, upon in their language up to this day. Another example, the word ruler H8269. Shore, which means to rule, reign. The sh makes a strong sh sound like ch. In Igbo Shirai still means ruler, reign. The word literally has not changed from its original meaning or pronunciation from the Hebrew text. The Hebrew word for, we, is H859. Any, and in the Igbo language the word to this day for, we, is still enyi, which is the same exact word as in the Hebrew script. HebrewReaders.com. Henry Callaway, the first bishop for Confraria, once stated that, the Zulu is a highly elaborated language, much more so than Hebrew, which in some respects it resembles. It is not only the Zulu language that closely resemble Hebrew but all Bantu languages. In fact, there are many Bantu words that bear strong resemblance to Hebrew words. For example, in Hebrew, bar or ben means sun, and in the Bantu language it is bena, bana, or bar. Water in Hebrew is mayim, while in the Bantu's language it is mai. In Hebrew, 7 is sheba, whereas in Bantu it is saba or samba. Thanks or praise is toda in the Hebrew, and in the Bantu's language it is tondo or matondo. In Hebrew to marry is baal, while in Bantu it is bala. In Hebrew to play or laugh is sakak, and in Bantu's it is tsaka or circa. In Hebrew the word angel is malik, in Bantu it is malaika. A barber in Hebrew is galab, in Bantu it is gala, or ogailitsa. The word for peace in Hebrew is shalom, whereas in a Bantu language it is salama. In the Bantu's language, power is called Yahweh, similar to the shortened Hebrew name of God Yah, which is translated as Jah in the King James Bible, as can be seen in Psalms chapter 68 verse 4. In Hebrew, Yahweh means Yah is the Father. King David's nephew Joab, pronounced in Hebrew Yahab, means Yah is the Father. By the way, there are many more Bantu words, which we have not mentioned in this presentation, that are very similar to Hebrew words, and in some instances exactly the same. The information given thus far should be proof enough that all Bantu dialects and accents are Hebrew, just without using the Hebrew characters, since the Bantus were given European alphabets to write their spoken sounds, which in turn caused them to not know to this day that they are speaking Hebrew.